My first day at the warehouse, a trainer handed me a scanner, pointed at a number on the screen that said 400, and told me that was my hourly pick rate target. And I remember laughing because I genuinely thought he was joking about that number. I'd taken the warehouse job because it offered immediate hiring and a starting wage higher than most retail positions nearby. And after months of inconsistent freelance work, the idea of a stable paycheck felt like exactly the security I needed at that point in my life. Orientation was a full day of safety videos, warehouse maps, and a supervisor explaining the scanner system. And somewhere in the middle of all that information, he mentioned almost casually that the quota system adjusted based on how fast everyone else was working that same shift.
Walking onto the actual warehouse floor for the first time, the sheer scale of it hit me immediately. Shelves stretching further than I could see clearly, and I remember feeling genuinely small standing at the entrance of a building built entirely around speed. The first hour actually felt manageable, following the scanner's directions from shelf to shelf, learning the walking patterns between aisles. And I remember thinking, this job might genuinely be easier than everyone online had made it sound before I started. By hour 3, the pace requirements started climbing steadily, the scanner counting down time between picks more aggressively, and I noticed my walking had shifted from a normal stride into something closer to a controlled jog between each shelf location. By the end of that first shift, the scanner displayed my numbers in red instead of green, and a supervisor stopped by my station just to mention, without much warmth in his voice, that I'd need to pick up the pace significantly starting tomorrow. I drove home that night with my feet throbbing in ways I hadn't experienced since standing all day at a previous job. And by the time I got through my front door, I genuinely questioned whether my body could physically sustain this pace for months at a time. The following days blurred together into an exhausting rhythm of waking up sore, forcing myself through another shift, chasing that same aggressive number, and coming home too tired most nights to do anything except collapse straight onto the couch. An older coworker who'd been working that same warehouse for nearly 3 years noticed how rattled I looked one afternoon and pulled me aside during a break to tell me that everyone struggles brutally in the first 2 weeks before their body finally adjusts to the pace. That same coworker taught me small efficiency tricks over the following days: how to walk in straighter lines between shelf locations, how to scan items without fully stopping my stride. And those tiny adjustments started shaving real time off my pick rate. In week 3, I felt a sharp pain shoot through my lower back while reaching for an item on a high shelf, and standing there frozen for a moment, genuinely scared I'd seriously hurt myself, made the abstract danger of that pace suddenly feel very real. I limped over to report the incident, and the safety coordinator took it seriously, walking me through paperwork and insisting I see a doctor before returning to my station, which was the first moment the company felt genuinely concerned about me as a person rather than a number. I spent the following 3 days at home, icing my back and genuinely questioning whether this job was worth the physical toll it was demanding. Lying on my couch, replaying that sharp pain over and over, wondering if I should just quit before something worse happened. My older brother, who'd worked physically demanding jobs for years, told me over the phone that getting hurt wasn't a personal failure, it was information, and that learning proper lifting form now would protect me for the rest of whatever career path I ended up choosing. When I returned to the warehouse floor, I approached every single pick differently, bending at my knees instead of my back, taking those extra half seconds that my brother had insisted actually mattered more than any speed I might sacrifice in the short term. Slowly, over the following weeks, my body actually started adapting the way that veteran coworker had promised it would, my pace increasing not through rushing recklessly, but through genuinely efficient movement,
and my numbers climbed steadily back into that green zone on the scanner.
By month 2, I'd built genuine friendships with several coworkers who understood exactly what that daily grind demanded, and our shared breaks became something I actually looked forward to, trading complaints and small victories in equal measure throughout each shift.
During the holiday peak season, the quota expectations climbed even higher than usual. Mandatory overtime stretching my shifts to 10 and 11 hours, and I watched several newer hires quit within days, unable to sustain the pace the season demanded of everyone.
I made it through that peak season by leaning heavily on the efficient habits I'd built over the previous months, and by reminding myself constantly that this intensity was temporary, a finite stretch rather than the permanent pace of the job itself.
After peak season ended, a warehouse manager pulled me aside to acknowledge that I'd maintained consistent numbers throughout one of the hardest stretches the facility had seen in years, and offered me a position training incoming new hires on the floor.
Training new hires meant walking a very fine line, being honest about how genuinely demanding this job was, physically, while also reassuring them that their bodies would adapt if they focused on proper form instead of pure panicked speed like I initially had.
I told every new hire almost exactly what that veteran coworker had told me months earlier, that the first 2 weeks would feel brutal and nearly impossible, but that pushing through with proper form instead of quitting too early would completely change how sustainable this job actually felt.
That warehouse job taught me that quotas measure output, but they never measure the quiet adaptation happening underneath, the small adjustments in form and mindset that eventually turn something that nearly broke you into something you can actually sustain long term. These days, whenever I face something that initially feels impossible to sustain, some part of me remembers that warehouse floor, that sharp pain in my back, and the slow, steady adaptation that eventually turned panic into genuine competence over time. If you're facing a quota or a pace right now that feels completely impossible to sustain, I promise your body and your mindset can adapt further than you think. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button and subscribe along, because every stick has a story, and there's a new one coming every week.